Welcome to Philosophy from the Frontline. This podcast explores the intersection of philosophy, entrepreneurship, and veteran transition. Join us as we delve into the minds of successful entrepreneurs who have made the journey from military service into small business ownership. Our guests will share their insights, experience, and unique perspectives on life, business, and the world around us. Through deep conversations and thought-provoking discussions, we hope to inspire and empower our listeners to tackle their own challenges and achieve their dreams. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the world of entrepreneurship from a veteran's point of view. This is Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Philosophy from the Frontline. This is episode number 115 with Heather McLean. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
That's pretty close.
Is it like Virginia or something else? But
it's more like McLean, like Virginia. But you know what? I answer to both.
Okay. Well, just don't call you late for dinner, I guess. Right.
There you go.
Well, welcome to the show. I appreciate having you on. She is a CEO, Air Force veteran, and an AI strategist. And so all of those things are super, super complex. But let's start with the simple thing. Let's find out about your background and what led you to serve. And then we'll talk about how you got into what you're doing today, because I know that's a hot button issue for a lot of people in the world, is understanding, the use of artificial intelligence. But the floor is yours. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So you said start with a little bit about why I got in the military. Actually kind of fell into it. I don't know if a lot of people have a similar story, but I never wanted to be in the military in high school. Like my mom kept trying to push me to go in, to pay for school. And I'm like, no. And I think it was more about that's what she wanted to do. And so it was not what I wanted to do. But then I actually got into college, started studying, and a friend of mine was getting interested in ROTC. And then my boyfriend at the time had enlisted in the Air Force. And so kind of turned me, from, turn off to maybe like, let's see what this thing is all about. So I signed up for an ROTC class, an Air Force ROTC class, which happened to be at a different university. So I had to travel to get there, but I didn't want to do Army. I wanted to go Air Force. And so, I joined, and then I ended up like loving it. They started giving me like awards and acted like they were happy to have me there. And it felt like, I think it's because it just felt like home to me. It just felt like a good fit, a good match. And so I did ROTC my whole 4 years in college. I had a scholarship and then graduated and didn't get into medical school. So there I went off to, Biloxi, Mississippi with the Air Force. So I kind of fell into it, but it was an amazing fit for me at the end of it all.
Yeah. So what I hear is like, sometimes you don't realize what you're doing
until
you're actually doing it. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge.
I think things happen for a reason too. There was probably a reason those things led me to going in the Air Force.
Yeah. And I've said it numerous times on this show, like, hey, serving in the military is a calling, right? It's almost as powerful a calling as, being a chaplain or, being a human resource worker, or, there's all these different types of career fields, but you'll be drawn to a certain thing. And once you're drawn to it, you kind of, you either bloom or plant it, or then you realize that you don't like it. So 4 years of college, medical school, that's interesting, because I know that like, that's not a normal fork in the road for most,
No.
Hey, so I'm either going to
and that didn't work out. I didn't get into medical school, and that was, the way it should have been too. But it's definitely always been an interest of mine, biology and medicine. So
yeah, well, it's funny because like I'm right up the street from the Research Triangle, right? And that's one of the biggest things that Raleigh and Durham is known for, is just all the amount of biomedical stuff. But the other part of it is artificial intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. So like there's a lot of AI in the medical industry that a lot of people don't know about. True. And so I think that's a huge part of just being aware of your surroundings and understanding what's going on. But certainly appreciate that. It says you did 20 plus years in the Air Force, so clearly you didn't just like the ROTC program. So how did that happen? Were there any like unique or interesting experiences that happened while you were in the suit? Because I know for people of a certain era in the military, there's a lot of change, and there was a lot of ongoing. So if you're a GWAT veteran, like you saw a lot of different things and just insights on, memorable experiences while you were in the Air Force.
Yeah. I did a lot of actually did several different jobs that were very different from each other. I didn't have an exciting career in the fact that I didn't deploy, I didn't go all over the world, so that it was a little boring in that aspect. But I did get to do many different things. So I started off as a supply officer, working down in Keesler, Mississippi, just learning kind of the ropes of supply chain management, warehouse management. That career actually got folded into a larger group called logistics readiness, and so we got to learn a little bit broader, more like transportation and planning of movements. So did that for first couple years. Had the opportunity to go and get my master's degree for free. That was my full-time job in the Air Force for about 18 months. And man, that was a huge blessing because if you've ever tried to go to school and work a full-time job, it's so hard. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to do that as my job for a couple years. Um, and then I got to work during 9/11. I was at the Air Mobility Command headquarters, which is like the air transportation part of the Department of Defense. So flying everything and everyone everywhere it needs to go.
Yeah.
And so I was part of the supply chain management group, managing that at like a headquarters level. So was needed there to kind of help manage all the parts. Think about when aircraft break all over the world, we have to get the parts to them.
Yep.
Have to manage all that. So got to do that. Got to go work for the 4-star general at Transportation Command. As part of his little group of officers. They called it the Commander's Action Group. That was a cool year. And then I went to go do something completely different. I joined the recruiting squadron on base and went and did recruiting. So I was like leading groups of enlisted recruiters and learned a ton about recruiting there. And then I kind of finished out my career as a reservist and also working at U.S. Transportation Command, managing like a $400 million IT portfolio. So like think about these big systems and how do we keep them going and how do we manage them? So I was doing that towards the end of my career. And so I'd say it was very interesting. I did a lot of cool and different things, which just makes me, I think, more well-rounded, more tools in my toolbox, as I like to say. But don't have any cool deployment stories. My husband went all over the world and he's got tons of them. And that's just not my story.
Oh, hey, that's fine. And
That's
look,
okay.
I tell people all the time, it's like, my battalion commander used to say this when I was a much, much younger guy, and at the time I didn't respect it. Now I do because I have a little bit more wisdom. Your level of importance has less to do with your proximity to the target, right? And, working in the logistics field. So, and I could say, unfortunately for me, but it was because I was good at my job. So I ended up being a battalion XO for like 5 years in the Army. And that means I understand logistics, right? And so the common discussion is, and we say it all the time, tactics are for amateurs, logistics are for professionals, right? And the reason why that is because there's a much larger, more things can go wrong.
Yeah.
And the impact is much, much greater at the strategic level if something doesn't make it to and from. So like if I'm using intra-theater lift and I have to get parts from a C-130 to move it somewhere else and it breaks, how do I fix that aircraft that is moving the parts to fix the bigger aircraft, and like, that's a huge problem.
It is.
And then on top of everything else, there are bodies and people attached to that piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And so it makes it a little bit more of a problematic scenario. We don't think of it that way. Like when you're young and silly as a, 18-year-old kid or 19-year-old kid in the military, you're just like, oh, these guys suck. They're just being harassing us and, preventing us from doing all the cool things that we want to do.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is like, there's a lot of horsepower behind it. And like most people don't understand that. And when you work, and I've worked in training units. So when I was at the Ranger Training Brigade years ago, you'd have these students complaining about like, oh, Ranger school sucks and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, hey man, do you realize that there's like no less than 70 people supporting you right now? You can't see them because we're all behind the scenes and you're hiding out and doing your job. And, you don't know how. People don't care about logistics until they're screwed up. That's probably the easiest. That's probably the easiest way to say it. So, I can, that part of your story definitely resonates with me. And I am actually a graduate of Maxwell as well. So I went to Air ILE and Maxwell Air Force Base, which I think was cool. That was an interesting year, hanging out with a bunch of Zoomies.
Yeah.
But It's helpful because that cross-pollination of different cultures allows you to
Right.
learn a lot more and experience a lot more about the military. And I wish it was an opportunity that more Army people had,
Right.
or at least the opportunity to get that master's degree at that mid-level career, because it helps. It really helps you move
It
forward.
did. Yep.
So, did logistics in the Air Force, career came to an end. What was the hardest part about transitioning? Because I know for me, there was a moment where I woke up and I was like, oof, man, I don't have to do PT anymore. It's like, what am I going to do tomorrow? And
Right.
so what was that like for you as you started to come towards the end of your career? And I think a lot of people, especially folks that are performing at the higher levels, or if you're operating, at the 3 or 4 star level, there's that expectation of like, hey, you're going to stay in forever, right?
Right.
You know,
Yeah. So for me, I think one of the hardest things is, so I went from working in a, military environment, where everything's very regulated, and what your day's going to be like most of the time. I was working at headquarters, to managing a small agile software development team, and that is with very different people. So like not only were like the groups of people different, but it was just a very different experience working with that kind of a team. So, creative engineers, engineers who are great at socialization or communicating. And so, like I think just learning how to work with different groups of people, and trying to approach things from a different perspective, and learning to work with just people that you never had to work with before. That was probably the biggest challenge for me, just adapting what I knew worked to a whole different set of people and a whole new environment. And it was way more relaxed, and there definitely weren't the same types of rules in place. And so like, how do you work with, like, it was just so chaotic at times. It felt
yeah.
like it, to me, it was like going from rigor to and structure to this chaotic environment that I had to try to figure out, all right, how do we put a little bit of structure in place here so we can all work together. So that was hard. I mean, and just a trivial thing, and maybe it's not a trivial thing, but just figuring out what to wear to work. Because
Oh,
right, for like 20
yeah,
years, you put the uniform on. Okay,
yeah.
just tell me which one and I'll go put that one on. And but then I'm like, "Oh god, I gotta, like, have shoes, and I gotta look presentable, and I gotta have," it's just that was a worry that maybe I didn't really expect until it happened,
Yeah.
and then you're just trying to navigate that for the first couple months.
Well,
But
I think that's important because like people will never tell you that during your transition. Like, like somebody may throw it off as like a comment, like, hey, make sure you have a nice suit or a
yeah,
nice pair of shoes. Right. And you hear that and you're like, okay, these are the tap people. These are the transition folks that are telling
mhm,
you to go out and get a nice suit and, have have a tuxedo because you might need it. And you're like, yeah, right, whatever. And then all of a sudden that moment happens and you're like, oh, maybe I do need this, and
right.
and sometimes if you anticipate it, it's a little bit easier to prepare for, but then there's times when you don't, right? And those times when you don't, it's like, oh man. And that's a simple nugget, right? So, hey, everybody that's listening in the audience, write this down. Find yourself a nice suit, get yourself a decent, like, cocktail dress for the ladies and a sport coat for the men. So you have that thing on the hanger ready to go. So if you
Yep.
have a client engagement that you need to go to, make sure that you can grab that thing. One of
Mhm.
the other things that I found, interesting in your last comment was about dealing with software people, right? Software designers and engineers are some of the most unique people you will ever meet in your life.
Yes.
And there are folks that 100%, like if you could not sleep in the morning and you called them at 2 o'clock, they would be awake writing
Yes, and they
code.
yes. And they also are the same folks who, like, would just tell you, like, "Leave me alone and put a pizza under the door, and, I'll be fine too." So they, sometimes little can be a little antisocial.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, I think that's also a very interesting aspect of it too. So you went from, organization like the military that is it's parasocial for the most part, right? Because you have
mhm,
interactions with people just about every day. It's like
yeah,
it's part of your job. But then you go into an environment where, people are working remote or people are working very, very isolated. And and again, it's like I don't know if it's broken until, something breaks, right? Like so I'm just hoping that things get done. And for the folks out there that, think about IT or think about being in software design, like it's expensive to successfully run a project through IT. So if you're a project manager, hold on, because like if you fall off that critical path, it's going to be super expensive. And how do you manage that? Because looking at your background, your wife, your mom, you've got all these other things that you're doing as well.
Yeah.
So how does that fit with the kooky schedule of software design?
So we were still in person back then. This was, 2015 through 2020, so so because we were agile, our team sat all together, which was nice. So we were in person all together. That helped a lot. But just like the dynamics of a group of different individuals like that, it was a lot to just kind of figure out. I think I spent a week or two just trying to figure out what is going on here, what is actually happening, and the way we would work was very collaborative, very shared responsibilities, not a lot of hierarchy. So I went from major hierarchy to very flat organization, and I think I handled it by just building trust, listening to people, getting to know them, creating friendships, relationships. And then also, when a decision had to be made, it was usually mine at the end, but you never want to do that without input. You never want to do that without listening to your team. And so I think just, building trust over time, we all sort of learned how to work together pretty well.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the important facets of, being a veteran, is understanding that, like, hey, look, there's people that you absolutely cannot trust in the military, but you can trust them to do their job.
Yeah.
Right. And then you kind of get into the reverse of that when you get into the commercial space. It's like, hey, I think this person can do their job because I don't really know what their job is, but then I have to trust that they know what they're doing, which is a completely alien
Right.
experience from the military. Because it's like, hey, look, the military promoted you to a certain rank, so I have a certain expectation of you being able to do certain things at that pay grade. And if you can't do those certain things at that pay grade, everybody knows, right? Like, everybody knows about it. So it's not difficult to hide, right?
Right.
But from smaller businesses and smaller teams, and it's, again, here's your small business lesson for the day, folks: over communication, right? You have to talk a lot, even though you may seem like, I don't know if this is really important. It probably is, right? If you're asking yourself that question, you need to let someone know and just be like, hey, look, this is where I'm at on this. I need some assistance, or I need you to weigh in on this, boss. You need to engage with this client, whatever it is, because I think a lot of people miss that because, we're used to knocking out the implied task in the military, right? Like, here's my list of things that I have to do. And then there's the things that I know that I have to do to get that thing done. Whereas when you transition, those things aren't as prevalent in the first couple of years. And so that's one of the things that I see a lot. And
like they say, you have to communicate something 7 times or something before people actually it sinks in.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot of talking.
Yeah, 100%. And then, sometimes with the new design models and short attention spans, they're saying it's 21 times, right? Depending on what message you're trying to deliver, right? So, like, proximity, of course, being part of it, but the other piece of it is like, hey, how many times do I have to tell this knucklehead the same thing over and over again? And I can appreciate that because I know that that's a hard part of it. But so transitioned out, started the new thing, and you are an entrepreneur that founded your own business. So what was that like? I know you said you had a small team and you were developing things in a very agile way. And, for your project management folks, like, there's the traditional way of doing it, and then there's the agile way of doing it. And agile takes a lot more mental flexibility because you're spending more than one plate.
Right.
But
well, after I left the military, I went to work for a global IT company, and that's what I did for 11 years before I started my own company. So when I was working for that company, we did specialize in software development, and I started as a project manager with one team. And the company was growing. They eventually got bought out by a bigger company, and I kept moving up in my career. Eventually, I became a senior director, and I was running a 400-person engineering organization, and we were delivering huge capabilities for Fortune 500 companies that you would probably recognize. So, like, millions of dollars worth of projects, big name clients, and it was extremely stressful.
Yeah, I don't doubt that.
And that's kind of after 11 years of that, I just got a little burnt out
Mhm.
and decided I needed to do something different. I got to a point where I wasn't learning or growing as a person. I just felt like I was fighting the same battles and wasn't able to advance any further in the company. And so I thought, I'm gonna do something different, and I'm gonna start my own company and do this the way I want to do it. So
Wow.
that was 3 years ago, and here we are.
Yeah, but again, veteran entrepreneurship is a big thing, or veteranpreneurship is one of the things that's happening a lot because again,
Yeah,
we talk about this all the time on the show, and like I've run into people that have transitioned out of the military, and it's like, hey, I've been in the army for 25 years. I'm going to show up, and these guys are going to pay me $250,000 to do X. And I look at those people and I say, that's great if you can get it, but most of the time you have to build it yourself to have that
yeah,
level of, to have that level of compensation, but also to have that level of compensation, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And so
yeah,
you have to balance both, right? So starting, starting your own business, that has to be interesting, especially in the space that you're in, just because like I've seen IT guys leave for pennies on a dollar, right?
yeah.
Like, oh, this guy, I don't like my manager and they're going to pay me, 55.75, and these guys are only paying me 55.70. And I've seen them leave for
Yeah,
reasons
but
like
you know what? The key there is I don't like my manager.
yeah.
And that person who you work for is the single most influential on like whether you stay or go.
Yeah.
And so our company is all about focusing on people. I wanted to prove that you could build a company where people were the priority, your clients are a priority, and you put that above making profits, and to prove that we could still do that and be successful.
Wow. And that's a great point. Wow, management matters. Surprise, surprise.
It
You
totally
know,
does.
and again, I can appreciate that because like like I could tell you the horror stories, but we're not.
We all have had those bad bosses,
Yeah.
and
And
but you learn from them.
I think that's the main thing is like learning from that experience and saying, okay, like, yeah, my boss is not doing things the way that I would do them. And sometimes it's not because that person sucks, it's because they just don't know any better because they
Yeah.
were never taught in through their experience because what they were allowed to do in their previous experience that allowed them to be successful. So why would I change it? I did things a certain way for 20 years. Why would I change it now? Well,
Yeah.
the environment's changed. you
Because it's
know,
important to be a learning, growing person and take in feedback and learn from your mistakes.
yeah, and you'd be surprised the number of people that, and I think but I think that's part of what leads to high veteran turnover in a lot of organizations. So like veterans get out and they're like, hey, I'm going to plant my flag and work in this job for the next decade, the next 20 years. Like this is my post career. Contrary to what, some people would say, it's rehirement, right? You do 20 years, you step out and you typically go into another job, even if it's for 4 or 5 years. And do you want to have a career or do you just want to have a job? Because a job's going to pay you money and like you can do
Mhm.
things with it. But a career is something that, builds value, builds legacy, builds, an accomplishment over time. And you see a lot of vets that don't get to that career state because they're switching jobs, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, I don't know because I do think that it's a little different these days with your ability to switch jobs and what you get out of switching jobs. Whereas, like, our parents, they would work for the same company forever
Yeah.
and there was loyalty there, right? But companies aren't loyal to people anymore. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times the only way you can get a raise is to switch jobs. So I hear what you're saying, though. There is something about being in an organization for a long time where you do build up those long term relationships and that network within that company, which can be very valuable. But I guess I can also see reasons why you would want to switch and go try to do something different with a different company, maybe.
Yeah, and I think you are right about that point too. Is because like again, leadership matters, and so if I have a good leader or a good organization, I might let some things slide. It's like I don't like that, but I'll deal with it because all the other people I work with are great, or
That's true.
I, I like the project that I'm on, and I think that's
Hmm.
what typically. And again, if you're a veteran getting ready to go interview, one of the questions that you need to ask is, what's your stance on loyalty? Because loyalty goes both ways, So it's back to your previous point of like, hey, boss, I've been working here for a year. I've accomplished the following 10 tasks. A smart boss is looking at that and going, well, he did 10, everybody else did 4. Maybe I should give that guy a raise or a position change or something to that
Yeah.
effect. And I've seen companies that only give those raises when they have that brutal conversation like, yo, man, like if you don't pay me anymore, I'm out the door, you know?
Yeah.
And if you're getting to that point in that environment, one, as
Yeah.
the employee, then you probably should have been gone already, right? But as the employer, if you are having those conversations once, twice, 3 times in
Right.
a quarter, you may want to evaluate your position in the organization and how you're treating your people, because again,
Right.
the people, people are more important than hardware, and that's an old SF thing, but it's the truth of just about everything that we do, right?
Yeah.
Like I can have the most sophisticated camera in the world to shoot television or to shoot college football or the NFL, but if there are no players on the field, nobody cares, right? And
So
so
true.
it's understanding the space that you're operating in. And speaking of the space that you're operating
Yeah.
in, that's a terrible
And
segue, but you know,
another thing that something I learned the hard way was like when you're in the military, a lot of times, if you have a good boss, they're going to be your advocate, right? They're
mhm,
going to help you get that next job. They're going to write you a good performance report. That
yeah,
is not necessarily going to happen in corporate America. I mean, I
yeah,
kind of thought that, oh, my boss and I have a good relationship. He or she will help me get to the next level. They'll help me figure out what I need to do. No, do not expect that. You need to be asking questions about how you do that. You need to be making that known. Send them the bullets on what you've actually done and accomplished. Like you have to be
yeah,
your own advocate in this world. And that I think I learned that too late, because I
yeah.
was kind of hoping other people would advocate for me, and that just didn't happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and nobody's gonna tell your story better than you, right?
This is so true.
And it's unfortunate that it has to be that way, but typically, that's the crossroads. And it's harder even for veterans sometimes when you transition because like I could be talking to if I'm interviewing with the HR screener, particularly at my age, there's a, 70-30 shot that I'm older than the person that's interviewing me, at least for the screening call.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a 70-30 shot that I'm probably older than the guy. Like, I don't know, I might be older than my boss right now. Who knows? Right. But at the end of the day, to me, it doesn't matter, but it may matter to them. And you are not going to know that, if you're not communicating or you're not articulating what your needs or what your wants are. And one of the big things that reason why I do the show is for mentorship, to go
Yeah.
back to your previous point is like, I don't, if our conversation helps one person, success, right? Because typically, and I mentioned it on the last show, I went 10 years without a mentor in the Army. I had
Hmm.
people that were looking out for me, like guys that knew me from previous assignments or whatever, but I never had somebody sit down and say, hey, Rob, what's your 5-year plan?
Yeah.
What are you doing when you retire? Like, have you thought about, where you're going to live? Like just
Right.
the simple questions of where you're going to live, what are you going to do? Like, are you happy with, the job that you have right now? And some people can't even talk about that
Right.
stuff, and it
Yeah.
makes
I
it
think
very difficult.
I think we're, in the military, we operate from like a perspective of humility a lot because that's what it requires to be a good team member. But I think that makes it hard for you to sell yourself and talk very positively about yourself when you're transitioning. That's a skill that you don't normally have. You're not going around talking about all the great work you've done. I mean, most of us aren't.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard then to go in an interview and talk about all the great work you've done when that's just not how you've thought about things for a long time. So you really have to, that's, I think, something that a good coach could help work with you on,
Yeah.
when you're putting your resume together and you're telling your story, you got to be able to talk about all the great things you do and what is great about you that's, different than other people. That's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. I mean, in the interview process, and there's some people that don't like sales calls, but it's a sales call, right? You're selling yourself to that organization in
Yeah.
the sense that, like, hey, look, I'm presenting you all the information about me so you can compensate me for the job that I'm trying to get, right? And I think again, there's some people that go in and it's a problem in some veteran communities of guys that get locked in on that one specific event that like shapes them for the rest of their adult lives. And it's a shame because it's like, hey, I know that there's more to you than that, but that's all that you point back to. You know, like I can remember in 2008 when this happened, like, brother, it's 2026, you know, like, let it go, you
Yeah.
know, like, and I'm not saying that in the bad sense of the way. It's just like, we understand that bad things happen to people. We understand that formative events happen in your life, and I'm okay with that, but don't let that formative event dominate everything that you're doing, because if you're always looking
Right.
backwards, you can never look forward, and that's the thing that becomes the pitfall for a lot of veterans. So we'll get into it, because like, I don't know how much longer we're going to talk. We'll talk a while, because I love this topic, and technology in general. So like for me, I did 20 years in the Army as an infantryman. At year 20, the human resources command said, hey, you've done math in your past, have you ever thought about doing electronic warfare and transition into EW? And so I did electronic warfare my last 3 years in the Army, and like, that's what I've been doing for like the last decade, is just technology.
Wow.
And then one of the pieces of technology that's a hot button issue in today's market is artificial intelligence. And that's what you do. So
Yeah.
could you tell us a little bit about, your AI strategies, and how, you help your customers or clients or just people on your team to have better understanding of that platform?
Yeah. So right when I was starting my company was really when AI was hitting the market. And I knew that the kind of people that wanted to come work for me were people that wanted to work on the leading edge of technology. So when AI sort of hit, we were like, this is perfect. This is where we want to focus. So that's where we've been for the last couple of years. We build custom AI solutions and other technology solutions for customers. So this could be everything from helping a company figure out their AI and data strategy, all the way to let me help you build this capability in production. I think the key thing that we focus on is making sure that whatever technology you're investing in, you're going to get value out of it, because you're not going to make an investment. You shouldn't make an investment unless you're going to get something back. And so you don't want to just like jump in, right? You want to have a good plan, you want to have a strategy, and you want to know what you're going to potentially get out of this before you just make that leap. So that's what we do.
Wow. And again, it's probably a gross oversimplification, and it's because you're used to it, right? And like, so if I talk to the average person that doesn't deal with artificial intelligence on
Yes.
a daily basis, most of the reaction is like, ugh, they back up, they throw their hands up. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to use that, you know. And some of those tools that are out there, again, like we talked about a little bit previously, as you start to use AI and understand it. Like, I have a buddy of mine who is teaching himself how to use Claude Code. Like,
Cool.
why? The reason why he's doing it is like, hey, I want to challenge myself and do something different. So he's writing code with Claude.
I love
He's like,
that.
he's built a dashboard, right?
Very
It's
cool.
like, and those products are available now, but they're only as good. And again, like for my artillerymen, they understand this garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yep.
If I put in good information, I get out good information. If I put in flawed
Right.
information, I'm gonna get a flawed result. And you know, we've seen market industry, put out bad AI results because somebody poisoned the AI because they wanted a particular thing to come out. Like, hey, I remember, I don't know, it was 2 or 3 years ago when like you typed in the founding fathers and you got like a black dude. It's like, hey, we're in the United States. Like, that wasn't very common. I don't think, Benjamin Franklin had an afro, just saying. But like, somebody had programmed their AI to deliver that result. And that's how you have to, use some of your intellect, and like, again, computational data, garbage in, garbage out. So if I'm looking
Mhm.
at something and I'm exploring it and it doesn't seem right, it probably is because it's not right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the advantages, at least in the visual or in the content creation space, that AI has not perfected, the visual. Like, I can get a still photo really well, but I can't make it look, there are some people that are getting photorealistic, but then, the audio track is off, or you
Yeah.
can't you can't get the correct expression. And like, here's your nerd moment for the day, but like, if you've ever watched a Pixar movie, nobody ever blinks simultaneously. One eye blinks about halfway and then the other one closes, right? And that's just the design flaw that has always been in, computer generated images,
Hmm.
right? So it's just the way that it is. And so when you know these things, you can be on the lookout for them. But if not, you're just going to get this deluge of
Yeah.
information that may or may not be valid. And I think that's the hardest part of artificial intelligence. It's not the availability of it, it's the vetting. And so like as you know, as a person in that space, I'm sure that you get probably more than your fair share of questions of like, how do I know it's going to do what I'm telling it to do? And like,
Right.
what are, you know, do you have like, how do you give your clients confidence that what you're giving them is going to be successful, and not in the sense, you know, you understand what I'm saying? Because I think a lot
Yeah.
of people are leery of it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also the type of things that we're doing are maybe larger things on an organizational scale. So maybe like if it's maybe an AI product, like a
Mhm.
SaaS product, there are things you can build in like guardrails and
Yeah.
evaluations, which will help keep the AI on a straight and narrow, right? Keep it where
Mhm.
you want it to. When you're working by yourself, it might be a little bit harder because one, like you said, it's depending on what you're bringing into it. But then you also need to look at what it creates and do a self check. I mean, you can read what it spits out to you, and you're like, that part's not right, this part's not right, and then you have to give it more direction, and then it gives
Mhm.
you maybe a better output. So there I think it depends on what you're working on, but there are ways you definitely can guardrail it and help it not to hallucinate, not to tell you the wrong
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing, and it's a probably a cottage industry of people that, you know, prevent AI hallucinations, if I could speak correctly today, you know, because I think there's this inherent fear of like, hey, it's going to put out bad data. It might, and that like that's the answer. It might. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
that it's yes or no. It might, and it all depends on again
Right.
what content you put in and how closely you're vetting it. And you know, for military purposes, you know, right now it's still maintaining the human in the loop, right? So if I'm using this artificial intelligence to identify a target, that targeting piece is going to only go so far before the big red button pops up on the screen and says, hey guy, you got to push this button to take care
Right.
of this problem. Because, you know, I personally think we won't see it in our lifetime, even though everybody says that that's the threat of like fully autonomous kill chains in the military, you know. And I think the reason why that's going to happen is because, like, again, you have hallucinations, you can put in bad data, you can have a, you know, you can misrepresent it, and everybody's concerned like, oh my gosh, AI, Skynet. Like, look,
Yeah.
Terminator was a movie in the 90s, guys, you know. Like, trust the experts, and you know, we have Heather here who is one, and so I really appreciate you coming on today. This has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it. But one last thing before we wrap the show is, you know, as you were transitioning, or even as you moved into your new business, because I think that's probably just as interesting. Uh, Mentorship, book, you know, podcast information, something that was helpful to you when you said, okay, hey, I'm leaving this gig, I'm starting a new one.
Mm.
You know, what's something that like mentally prepared you to get over that hump? Because I know that there's a lot of people that get like on the front side of the roller coaster and then they get stuck.
Mm. I guess some of the best advice I've ever gotten has been to bloom where you're planted. And that worked well for me in the military. It's worked well in every job I've ever been in, right? Like, do the best job you can wherever you're at. And for me, it usually led to someone recognizing that at some point. Um, but that's probably the best piece of advice. And that, even the civilian world, do your best job. And if you don't like that job, then go find a new one, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing stopping you from moving on. You're not held to anything. So, but give it a shot and try to be the best person in that role that you can be.
Yeah, and I think that that's amazing advice. That advice works well from like ranger school until retirement, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I say that because it's like, hey, if you're going to be a squad leader, be the best squad leader. If you're going
Yeah.
to be, you know, if you're going to be a fighter pilot, why not be the best fighter pilot? Like, you know, if you're going to be a logistician, be the best at logistics. Like, it means more work. It means more
Sure.
people are going to come to you and ask you questions and ask for support. But at the end of the day, guess what?
Yeah.
It builds, you know, it builds your relationship. It gives you those sets and reps of success that will allow you to build more success. And so
Yeah.
I can appreciate your time, and so we're going to wrap this thing up. Do you have anything that you want to plug before we end the show? But I will tell you, I am very appreciative of this opportunity to have a chance to interview you, and thanks for coming on. But I'll give you the floor, and then we'll wrap this up.
Thanks, Rob. I've really enjoyed the conversation as well. I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately, and this has been so much more conversational than a lot of the ones. And so I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. I would just say if you're stuck on AI, you're not sure where to start, please reach out. Chats are free and they're a lot of fun. It's good to meet new people. So you can check us out on McLeanForrester.com check me out on LinkedIn, send me an email at info@McLeanForrester.com. So we're here to help any way we can.
That's great. And again, I really appreciate your time today. And look, that's what we try and do. I try and turn this into like a water cooler discussion rather than like, hey, so what did you think about, like, look, if you wanted, if I wanted to engage with a chat prompt, I would have a chat prompt. Right. Yeah. And so, speaking of AI, like there's tons of, like, I can build an AI generated podcast, but it's not going to have the same level of engagement as we're having right now. I appreciate your time today. And hey, for episode 115 of Philosophy from the Frontline with Heather McLean, we will see you guys on the high ground. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Philosophy from the Frontline. We hope today's conversation gave you valuable insights into the journey of veterans transitioning into the world of small business. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It helps more people find us and supports our mission to empower veteran entrepreneurs. Stay connected with us on social media and visit our website for more resources, tips, and episodes. Remember, your service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. Your next mission is just beginning. Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay resilient, and turn your battle-tested skills into business success. This has been Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground. Thanks.